So, looking at that title, you're probably thinking, what do you mean, it's not what you wanted? This game has gotten nothing but praise, blah blah blah. I get that. The fact of the matter still stands. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity wasn't what I wanted. And that's not me playing things up. This legitimately wasn't what I wanted going into this. What I wanted when they showed us the trailers and what have you is a prequel to Breath of the Wild. If there was one gripe I had with Breath of the Wild, it's that all the good stuff happened 100 years before we actually started playing. Throughout Breath of the Wild, I kept thinking to myself that I wanted to be playing here, not here. I thought that's what Age of Calamity was going to give us, but I was wrong. Instead, we got split timelines. All that being said, what we did end up getting was probably better than a prequel. To be honest with you, if this was a legit Legend of Zelda game instead of a Warriors spin-off, then it'd probably be my favorite one, or at least in my top 5. This game was honestly that good. It's weird, with the other reviews I've done on this channel so far, I've had a lot of negatives to talk about, but honestly, this is going to be my first overly positive review. I mean, I like this game so much, I finished everything it had to offer, and I still want more from it. I'm going to be taking a deep dive into things, but the first chunk of this video will be completely spoiler-free, and I'll let you know when we start going into spoiler territory. But without any further delay, let's boot it up. Right off the bat, let's talk about the visuals. If I showed you this cutscene right here, you would think it's from Breath of the Wild. And that is great. Honestly, it makes me feel like I'm playing more Breath of the Wild instead of something completely different. As it stands, most things look like they've been ported directly from Breath of the Wild. Everything down to the character models, animations, the UI, and even most of Link's outfits were pretty much just ported from Breath of the Wild itself. For a lesser game, this would be a problem, but it never feels like the reused assets are a hindrance to the game itself. It doesn't feel like this was some cheap way of recycling something we've already had before, because everything in this game feels so damn polished. If anything, I assume it allowed them more time to add a fuck ton of content to this game, since they didn't need to build most of the character models and set pieces from scratch. Age of Calamity stands as a perfect example of reused assets done flawlessly. Speaking of the set pieces, the playable areas all look phenomenal. They're not like hyper realistic or anything, but each area looks just as amazing as they did in Breath of the Wild. The lighting in a lot of maps really sells it for me, especially if they've got that Armageddon or Blood Moon filter going on. Outside the playable areas don't look great. You can clearly tell when a landscape is just a JPEG, but that's honestly not too bad because you hardly notice things outside the playable areas when you're busy slashing up enemies. Overall, it's nice to see Hyrule back in its former glory. Revisiting locations that I only ever knew as destroyed landscapes feels great. It's amazing to see some of these locations know that I've been there before, but instead of essentially just being an open field, they're an entire town. It's just, I don't know, it's just bizarre, but in a good way. I mean, I'm all here for it. However, like any Warriors game, this one is prone to lag spikes here and there. It's especially noticeable in characters like Urbosa, because when you have a million enemies running at you, you're on a large map, and you have lightning particle effects all over the place, the frame rate tends to just drop dead for a few seconds. Most of the time the game runs pretty smoothly, and by smoothly I mean 30 frames per second, but when the frames dip, it's really noticeable. It's not bad enough to make the game, or even characters like Urbosa, completely unplayable though. The combat in this game legitimately feels like an upgrade from Breath of the Wild's combat in every way possible, and that's mainly because everything from Breath of the Wild's combat was worked into Age of Calamity's combat. If anything, doing things like parrying a Guardian's laser or perfect dodging into a flurry rush hold more weight in this game. In Breath of the Wild, yeah, it was a good bit of free damage, but in this game it allows you to hit their weak point gauges, drawing you closer to a critical hit opportunity. Aside from that, you have your standard Warriors combos, which is really just mashing the Y button and occasionally pressing X, and your dodge. However, you also have the Sheikah Slate abilities, which are primarily used for counterattacks, allowing you to critically damage the opponent if you use the right one to counter them. Then you have your elemental rod abilities, which can be used to counter enemies of a specific type, allowing you to deal the big damage. The controls feel a little overwhelming at times, especially early on, but once you've gotten the hang of it, you'll be using your abilities instinctively. Honestly, it's amazing how they took such a simplistic yet effective combat system, applied an entirely different franchise's combat system to it, and it still ended up blending perfectly. I can't get enough of the combat in this game. I really can't. It's insanely fun. Each character has their own playstyle too. I'm not going to delve deep into all 18 playable characters or anything because 1, spoilers, and 2, that'd make this video essay way too long. But my go-tos are Link, Revali, Urbosa, and another character that uses a bow that I can't mention right now because again, spoilers. Out of the 3 I can mention, they all play pretty differently. Link is pretty much your straightforward Warriors character, but I do prefer his playstyle in this game compared to the previous Hyrule Warriors version of Link. Urbosa revolves around a charge gauge and rapidly unleashing electrical attacks, and Revali prefers the air, so most of his attacks revolve around you flying into the air and then performing your combos from above. You can play him on the ground, but why would you do that to yourself? I enjoy most characters, but really it boils down to which character do you like best. It's all personal preference. Each one has some sort of gimmick, which makes alternating between them never feel too samey, which ends up going a long way for replayability. As I already mentioned, there's a ton of content in this game, and due to the amount of characters and how engaging the combat actually is, it never gets too repetitive for me. Even after you beat the main story quest, you've still got a ton of stuff to do scattered around the map. A lot of it just amounts to helping out the people in Hyrule, and in return you'll usually end up getting a new combo, more health, some kind of new skill for your characters, or a clothing item for Link. But there are plenty of battles thrown into the mix that actually offer a substantial challenge, even on normal difficulty. Aside from farming for Korok seeds, I never felt like anything was too grindy either. There was a bit of a grind for some things, especially if they involve wood, meaning you need to start the deforestation of Hyrule, but it was never too overburdening. You can find and upgrade your weapons too. There's an entire system for it with higher damage numbers, weapon bonuses, all that good stuff, but I didn't really care about those things. As a smooth-brained American, as long as I see this number get higher, I'm happy. Unless the bonus will clearly benefit the character, then yeah, I did put a little bit of effort into that. Link can be fully customized like in Breath of the Wild. The downside to this is that there's only one entirely new outfit, that being Link's original Hyrule Warriors outfit, and you get that for completing everything on the map. I'd probably just end up with this outfit by the end of the game anyhow, but still. After completing the story, some of the other characters also have alternate outfits. Really, that just boils down to, do you want the champion scarf or not? The major gripe I have with it is that some cutscenes are pre-rendered, meaning that your customized Link will show up in one cutscene, but in the very next he'll be wearing whatever he's canonically supposed to be wearing. It's just a bit jarring sometimes, because there's no time between some of these events to change outfits. It's not game-breaking, just a bit less immersive, I guess. It'd be a crime to talk about this game and not at least mention the music. To put it simply, it's phenomenal. Whether it's a straight-up port from Breath of the Wild, something remixed from Breath of the Wild, or something entirely new, there isn't a single track in this game that doesn't slap. They even threw in the main Legend of Zelda theme, which was noticeably absent from Breath of the Wild, aside from, like, the very end. You just pull out the Master Sword and it's like, do, and that's just, it's great. It's hype as hell. I'm only going to be using Hyrule Warriors music as background music for this video, aside from the Sky Tower theme I use at the end of every review, so you'll hear it, and have been hearing it. But these themes really get you in the mood to slash up thousands of enemies. It's nice to hear different versions of each character's theme in particular too. Speaking of characters, without diving into spoilers, each champion was on full display here, both from a personality standpoint and a skill standpoint. Which is great, because honestly in Breath of the Wild each character was essentially a one-note stereotype. Urbosa was the strong warrior with a kind heart, Daruk was the cheerful giant, Revali was a prideful asshole who was willing to acknowledge Link's skill, but always indirectly.
Guess I was wrong about how lucky he would be.
He's my favorite. And Mipha was basically just shy and infatuated with Link in every scene she was in. I didn't like Mipha in Breath of the Wild, mainly because that's an annoying stereotype for me. This game essentially cranks those things up to 11 for everyone except for Mipha, in which I think they actually improved on her character by not making every scene she's in having her fawn over Link. There's still some of that in this game, but it's dialed back and you're able to see her other attributes shine through. I can safely say I like Mipha now. Revali and Urbosa didn't really change much, but the two of them played off each other well, with Urbosa usually being the one to call Revali out on his attitude. If anything though, I feel bad for Daruk. It seems like he got the least amount of screen time out of all the champions in this game, and there wasn't too much going on there on his end. All in all though, each champion feels like a fleshed out character. Even Link got some time to show character, like when he ate rocks, and when he ate another rock. This is the face of a man who can do anything, and I love it. There's one scene in particular where something is happening and it looks like it catches him completely off guard, and while he wants to do one thing, he's ultimately forced into doing something else because he has no choice but to do that. So yeah, even Link got some decent character in this game. Although half the time he's on screen, he still looks just as much like a lost dog as he did in Breath of the Wild. He never seems to know what's going on, but he nods when he needs to. Zelda though? This is honestly the best interpretation of Zelda since Spirit Tracks. The same story beats are present from Breath of the Wild. Her powers won't awaken, she knows the Calamity is coming, and is being consistently pressured by her father to focus on her duty. However, due to certain happenings in the game, even that is cranked up to 11. I felt for Zelda throughout the course of this game, and when things finally start working out for her, it feels earned. It doesn't feel like things needed to go right to progress the story. It feels like she got to where she needed to be, and then continued growing as a character further even after. If there's one character that wasn't that great, it'd be the main villain. No, not Ganon, but this guy. He was essentially just your generic bad guy character. He even said some generic bad guy lines like "playtime is over" and whatnot. His motivations are pretty bland too. He was more or less just a conduit to further things for Calamity Ganon. Not terrible, but everything about this guy, what he does and what happens to him, is just really predictable. Even the game seems to be self-aware of that at times too. There was like maybe one cool thing he did. Thankfully, you had a villain like Koga to fill the void.
Yiga, assemble! Me excluded, of course.
He was a delight to see on screen, and his voice actor really nailed that performance.
I don't mind one itsy bitsy bit. And do you know why?
So at least there was a halfway decent villain in this story. I say halfway decent because he wasn't really a good villain, but he was a lovable goofball.
The stupendous chief of the Yiga clan, Master Koga, is gonna kill you all to death!
Speaking of the story though, this is the point where I'm going to start talking about spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled in the game, stop this video and go out and play it for yourself. Honestly, this game was worth it. Even if it's not exactly what I wanted going into it, it was completely worth it. If you're a fan of Breath of the Wild, I can almost guarantee you'll like this game for what it is. For those who have beaten the game and are just trying to validate their opinions, want to hear my opinions, or haven't played the game and just don't care about spoilers, then we're going to be jumping into that right now. The story can be summed up in 2 words. Time travel. Basically, the events of Breath of the Wild happened, but at the point where Zelda finally awakened her powers to protect Link, Egg woke up. Gonna call it Egg, by the way. Egg has the ability to travel through time, and when it does, both it and a little bit of Ganon's malice were sent back before the Great Calamity happened. Egg gets found by Link, and the malice that went back in time possesses the dormant egg of this timeline. So you've got 2 eggs that are really the exact same egg, but one is an evil version, and one is a good version. Okay, one thing to keep in mind about time travel in this game. The events of the future don't get changed if the past gets changed. So this game doesn't rewrite Breath of the Wild. All of that still happened. It just shoehorns itself into another timeline. When you make a story about time travel, it gets fucking weird. Just keep that time travel law in mind going forward. It is important. Aside from Malice Egg recruiting a sorcerer named Aster to do its bidding and make sure the future still happens, nothing about the setup of this game differs from Breath of the Wild's history. Even though Purah and Robbie were able to see images of the future, the first act, I guess, revolves around Zelda being unable to awaken her abilities, her father pressuring her to fulfill her duty, the recruitment of the 4 champions, the piloting of the Divine Beasts, and finding the Master Sword and the hero destined to wield it. The circumstances of these things changed, but ultimately, if the game ended as each champion is fighting their respective Blight Ganons, you'd more or less have your prequel. Just an alternate telling of it. The overall structure of the story didn't change until Zelda was ready to head to the Spring of Wisdom, an event that happened in a Breath of the Wild flashback. While she was heading out, the Calamity struck a day early. Due to the timestamps on the images from the future, they thought they knew when the Calamity was going to strike. But this go around, things were different. After fleeing from the castle, more images were discovered of the Divine Beast being possessed by Ganon. Like in Breath of the Wild, Zelda has a moment of vulnerability, exclaiming how she's failed, and how everything she's done up until now has all been for nothing. This is where the story deviates. egg goes. Clearing the sky, which allows Zelda to realize that the blue lights on Vaughn Meadow are still present, meaning there's still time to stop the Calamity. Going forward, this game stops being a prequel, and this moment in particular was a crucial make-or-break segment of this game. It'd be easy to say, oh, the champions are stronger in this timeline, or have Link kick down a door and save them from their inevitable demise. Both of those options would have spat in the face of Breath of the Wild, so I'm glad that what they did instead worked so well. Any way I describe what happens next would either be me trying too hard or describing it in a very anticlimactic way. So instead, here's my initial reaction to the next bit. I hope that gets my thoughts across. What? No. What? No. No, these people aren't alive yet.
Where did you...
You can't just...
Lady Arbosa.
Okay. Alright. Alright, I'll fucking give it to you, game. I'll fucking give it to you. Jesus Christ. Even the fucking seal gotta cut in. What? Okay. Alright. I don't know how to respond to that. I have no fucking idea how to respond to that. After a little over a week since I was in the spot, I know exactly how to respond to that. This was perfect. And yes, in case you're wondering, on the other end of things, Yunobo came to save Daruk, and Sidon came to save Mipha. This came completely out of left field and was the perfect way to save the champions, because in order to get this to happen, this needed to happen first. For a game like this, it'd be very easy just to disregard canon and do anything else that alters the events just for the sake of a storybook ending, but this doesn't just acknowledge Breath of the Wild, no. It slaps you in the face with it. On top of that, these four didn't outright save the champions by showing up in just the nick of time. The champions alone struggled against the Blight Ganons, and even with the aid of their future counterparts, they still struggled together. To put things in Urbosa's words,
You bought us much needed time. Now look who's come to help.
Then Link kicks down the door and sticks it to him. It doesn't allow for the champions or even the replacements to be outshined by one another. Still ends up with Link coming in to save them, and without time getting messed with, Link couldn't have arrived in time to save them. There's a lot that really ropes itself around how perfect this is. Anything else they could have done would have been either too lackluster or a smack in the face for Breath of the Wild's version of the champions. On top of all of that, seeing Teba realize how much of a dick Revali was,
I never thought the champion would be so...
Hold that thought for now.
Riju getting to experience firsthand how one of the most notorious leaders of the Gerudo handles herself, Yunobo get to fanboy and seemingly become more confident in himself by the end of the game, and Sidon's heart shatter to pieces several times over, was a wonderful thing. Honestly, if anything, I hope this game is canon. Not in a way that's like blatantly obvious. You don't need Yunobo running around in Breath of the Wild 2 like, I learned this while fighting alongside the great Daruk or something, but in a subtle way. Sidon in particular looked like he got some much needed closure on his sister's death, but even then, while he did help save Mipha, he didn't help save his sister. She's still dead and gone. There's gotta be some good character development in there somewhere. With the Divine Beast fully back under the control of the good guys, everything is in place to take on Ganon. Except for Zelda, who still hasn't been able to awaken her powers yet. During an attempt to take back Fort Hateno, Aster decides to intervene, summoning forth all four of the Blight Ganons. Link, being the hero, rushes headfirst into battle, telling Impa and Zelda to go. Zelda, being tired of running away all the time, rushes in to save Link, and in a parallel to Breath of the Wild, her powers finally awaken as she saves Link. After this, Zelda takes on the role as the leader in the fight against Ganon, and with her at the helm, they retake Fort Hateno, save both Purah and Robbie, and have them reactivate towers all across Hyrule, since they were deactivated back when the Calamity struck, and then have every army in Hyrule teleport into Hyrule Field to retake Hyrule Castle. Even the Yiga clan takes part after being betrayed by Aster. This right here is what makes a Warriors game the perfect choice for telling a story about the Calamity. No other Zelda game has had this sense of scale when taking on a major threat. It's generally just one dude, the princess, and maybe some side characters depending on which Zelda game you're playing. Seeing all of Hyrule unite against Ganon gives this a much grander finale, even after storming the castle and you end up with just the main cast. Which, upon storming the castle, you're met with Aster and Malasag, which decided to go full murder mode. After defeating both of them, Aster becomes absorbed by Calamity Ganon, leading to an entirely different take on Ganon than what we had at the end of Breath of the Wild. Long story short, you race into the castle, fight Ganon, defeat Ganon, save Hyrule, and the future people return to their own timeline. That about wraps up the story. There's obviously a lot more that I could go on about, and there are some key things in particular that I decided to leave out for the sake of time. I've already wasted more than 20 minutes of your time here, and if I went into full detail on everything, this video would be well over an hour. So go out and play this game. Me just rambling about the story doesn't do it justice, and there's still plenty of things for you to discover about it for yourself. The story wasn't just serviceable in this game, it was downright amazing. The story alone is what really puts this game on as high a pedestal as possible. It was emotional, it was twisty, it had some comical moments, and even a few cringy moments too. This story had a heart, it had soul, and is probably the best story tied to the entire Zelda IP. So, to kind of bring things to a close, this game wasn't what I wanted. I think I've stated that enough times already in this video, and I know some people are bound to be more upset about that than I was. However, the game we got was completely worth it in my opinion. By the end of it, when you see your main cast walk away from Hyrule Castle where previously you only saw Link and Zelda leave the castle in Breath of the Wild, that just ended up feeling earned. There was a lot that could have gone wrong without it being a proper prequel, but they ended up getting most things right, and I appreciate that for what it is. I hope to see more from this game, and since it's a Warriors game, I assume we'll get DLC where we get to play as Aster and learn a bit more about things from his end, and we may even get things that were in Breath of the Wild but didn't show up in this game at all. I'm also expecting a DLC that takes place during Breath of the Wild's future. I mean, how else are they going to capitalize on making Cass a playable character? I don't know, but I would love to see them do something more with this game, rather than just leave things here. But with all that being said, I won't take up too much more of your time. If you like this video, leave a like, comment about how wrong my opinions are, subscribe, check out my Twitch, Twitter, all that end of the video, smooth jazz, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.